Well, you mentioned Mark Canna, so that's a great transition into my Tigers. Obviously, the huge headline going into the trade deadline with the Tigers was, "Will Turk Skubal be traded? The best pitcher in the American League, a lefty under control for not only the rest of this season, but two more seasons afterwards." Uh, Essentially, the Cy Young. He's right now looks like the Cy Young Award winner for the American League. So that made all sorts of speculation that, the top of the MLB prospect list might be coming back to the Tigers for that kind of return. Jackson Holliday was mentioned. Of course, everyone with the Orioles was mentioned.
Yeah,
Cody
they
Mayo.
every player on the Orioles has been mentioned for every trade
Yes.
possible.
I
They're still
specifically
all there.
mentioned how yeah, I specific and I mentioned Holiday and Mayo, and then potentially a catcher that's actually their number 2 prospect, Basillo, whatever. None of them got traded. Uh, but it kind of led to kind of false hope or false enthusiasm about what the future of the Tigers could be, because if that trade happened, which I was against, and I think most Tigers fans were against, but if, like we called it, the Godfather offer came through, where it's like they were just blown away by a trade offer of prospects that could change the franchise forever, then you'd have to consider it. And the only team that was in a position to do that ended up being the Orioles. So we focused specifically on Holiday, who would start tomorrow for the Tigers as a shortstop, or
Apparently he's
Cody
starting in
Mayo.
the apparently he's starting in the next few days. I read today for the Orioles. He's coming back
Well,
up.
he's already hit a grand slam
Oh,
for the
today.
fucking Orioles. So,
Oh,
yeah,
today? Did he
so
hit one today?
yeah,
Sorry. Yeah.
yeah. So that's of course. Cody Mayo would have started tomorrow for the Tigers at third base. That's what Tiger fans were kind of looking at this trade deadline, because those names were thrown out there, and it was a at least in most people's minds a realistic return for Turk Skubal if he was going to be traded. Problem is, the Orioles had no interest from day one in trading any of those guys, which we've seen. They didn't trade any of them. So it's kind of false hope. I don't think the Tigers had any interest in trading Skubal either. Why would you? He's the potential AL Cy Young Award winner. They've got it under control for 2.5 years. So it, it's kind of, I blame myself. I blame uh, Sports Talk Radio. I blame the media. That things got out of control the way we thought potentially how the Tigers could be transformed with one trade, even though it would be very painful to lose Skubal. It would have revolutionized the whole left side of their infield potentially, maybe even more. So that was kind of a fool's errand that kind of set like false expectations for the fan base, which I think we're now seeing the results of, as Detroit Sports Talk Radio today was unhappy. Even the more rational hosts that I like in the middle of the day, Carson Anderson, um, on 97 won the ticket. They're more reasonable. They're not shock jocks by any means. They seem pretty fair about their assessment of things. They were downtrodden about how things turned out, mainly about how the Jack Flaherty trade turned out. But I think the real angst from Tigers fans, at least today, is we kept thinking that we were going to get a transformative trade, which, specifically Jackson Holliday and maybe Cody Mayo and others. It just was never realistic, and it was all incumbent on the decision making of two people. If it was going to be the GM for the Orioles or Scott Harris from the Tigers, that it was just never going to happen, but we thought it might. So that kind of colored the whole perception of the trade deadline, but specifically with Jack Flaherty, who was not he was traded at the last minute because the Tigers like to give me a fucking heart attack every year, apparently, where they can't get a significant deal done before the deadline. Last year, I was waiting. to the last. Well, it was actually the last hour when they finally announced that Eduardo Rodriguez was not being traded because he had turned down his he had exercised his no trade clause inexplicably to both the Tigers and the Dodgers at the time. Um, this year, I was breathlessly refreshing Twitter for the last hour, just biting on every little rumor here and there. I saw at one point there was a rumor that Jackson Holliday had been scratched from the lineup at AAA Norfolk, as if he was going to be traded in the next moment. That was apparently an erroneous report because it was like a rain out from the night before that people were talking about, or it was ridiculous. But that's the fun of Twitter. The last thing that's fun about Twitter, I guess. The first thing that got me into Twitter 10 plus years ago is the trade deadline, being able to follow Ken Rosenthal and reputable reporters as much as I could to get the latest information.
Like
That's
Bob
that's what I was.
Nightingale?
Well, we'll get to Bob Nightingale for sure on this, but at some point. But so Jack Flaherty got two prospects from the Dodgers organization, top 30 prospects from their organization. They move into the top 25 immediately of the Tigers organization. One of which is a top 100, must be Baseball America, because you said none of the MLB pipeline top 100
Yeah.
were traded. So again, who knows?
Yeah, exactly.
Catcher, first baseman. The other was a shortstop. Those are needs for the Tigers, but the problem is the early or the day before, or maybe it was 2 days before, the Astros traded for a really mediocre Blue Jays pitcher. I forgot his last name, Japanese pitcher, but um, and they gave up like their number 3 and number 5 and another prospect. A really good return for a pitcher that had a ERA just below 5. So Tigers fans saw that. It's like, well, fuck, we've got Jack Flaherty, who's got 2.95 ERA right now and has been pitching lights out throughout the season. So our expectations were raised, and to just get back to kind of middling, you know, not consensus top 100 prospects by any means, was deflating. There's some explanations for that. Specifically, on Monday, my interest was piqued again on Twitter when Jack Flaherty was scratched from his start later that night against the Guardians. So it's like, oh shit, there was definitely a trade imminent. And it's been revealed today that actually there was a trade imminent with the Yankees, which was a really a perfect scenario in my mind, because at that point it was the day before the trade deadline. I thought if the Yankees would be a perfect trade partner for the Tigers because you could trade Flaherty to strengthen the Yankees. The Orioles would see that and finally realize they needed to step up their offer to get Scooble to counteract their division rivals move. So I'm like, well, this is the fucking perfect scenario. Unfortunately, the Yankees backed out of that deal Monday night, and it's been reported that they freaked out about Flaherty's medicals, and he has had a back issue that has pushed him back a couple days on a few starts. He's had 2 different injections in his spine or in his back, whatever it is. But after those 2 injections, though, he's had 3 starts where they're all but one was a quality start, and the only reason the third wasn't a quality start is because he only did 5 2/3 innings, so it's like right there. So I think I underestimated what that back issue might mean for his trade value, or how opposing GMs could actually use that against Scott Harris in the negotiations. Either way, it makes Scott Harris look like a young, naive general manager once again, much like last year. Even though I defended him, in that the real problem with the Eduardo Rodriguez trade last year was Eduardo Rodriguez is a fucking flake, or he
Right.
was manipulated by his wife, which you can go back to our YouTube page, the bold English D section for all my Tiger shit. But there's a lot of theories on what actually happened there. But I didn't blame Scott Harris for that. But I'm a little worried Scott Harris is getting the perception of he can be taken advantage of by other general managers, which it's fine for fans to think about, to be upset about that. But if other general managers know that Scott Harris is a little bit in over his skis, that's a bad situation to have, where he doesn't have the reputation of driving the hard bargain or sticking to his guns or manipulating situations to his advantage. He could be taken advantage of, and I feel like that's happened again this year. But some of that perception is Tigers fans had such huge high hopes, just having ideas like Jackson Holliday and Cody Mayo, like our franchise is going to be completely changed after yesterday, and that's just not the reality. So there's frustration in Detroit, um, understandably so, but I still want to reserve judgment. I've been kind of a Scott Harris apologist, and he's only in his second year essentially. I'm going to continue to do so, but this doesn't help his case or build his resume in anyone's mind. So I don't know. I might my undying support for Scott Harris might be wavering, and might be wavering soon. One thing that could solve that is, a lot of people pointed out, Scooble's got just 2 years left on his deal, and they're holding on to him. They need to fucking go for it in the next 2 years. Like, you've got a potential Cy Young Award winner in your rotation. Like, what are we doing? We can't continue this, kind of spinning the wheels on the hamster wheel of a rebuild. It's time to put your chips in, and utilize the talents you have. So I'm afraid we haven't seen that under the Scott Harris regime. We haven't seen that under the ownership of Chris Ilitch. I'm afraid they're going to view this as still a long-term thing, where one player doesn't determine how they're going to proceed going forward. So I don't know. I'm afraid Tigers fans are going to be in for some more angst. Well, I guess we'll address that in the offseason as things progress. But other trades, Tigers made early in the trade window, was Carson Kelly, veteran catcher. No brainer. He was on for a 1 year deal. The best part of that is it opened up a spot for Dylan Dingler, which you may remember me speaking of him as far back as the 2021 draft, just because of the obligatory Dirk Diggler jokes
Right.
that I will never resist. As a huge Paul Thomas Anderson fan and Boogie Nights, Dylan Dingler, it's just a hilarious name. Too close to Dirk Diggler, but it's not just a joke, because his OPS is like 939 in AAA Toledo over the season with 17 home runs. He is a legit catcher. He just got called up yesterday. I think it was his first game. So that trade made perfect sense, to just move Carson Kelly out of the way, get whatever prospect that I will remain nameless, that we'll may hear about or not in a couple years. But the idea that you're open up room for a prospect like Dylan Dingler is cool, and I'm excited to see what he can do, considering what he's been doing in the minors. They also traded Andrew Chafin to the Texas Rangers. Journeyman has been with basically all my favorite teams. He was a Cub, then he was with the A's, and then he was at the Tigers, and then came back to the Tigers, and now he's with the Rangers. So, again, I don't know what they got in return, but doesn't really matter. I mean, they're trading away the 1 year deals. Nothing shocking about the deals they made. Just would have been nice if they could have gotten more.
Wordhole Media.